So my name is Adam Cohen, and I'm very glad that Rachel invited me to come here and speak to you guys. I want to let you know a little bit about who I am. I had sent out some information for people to look at. It was a couple of videos and some written information so that people were prepped before I came here. This builds on that information, so a lot of you might find that this is not really, it's a little confusing, but if you have questions, we'll do those at the end. Okay, so who am I and why am I here? Okay, I am an architect, builder, and an energy geek, and I'm also a fellow of the Edmund Hillary Institute here in New Zealand, and I'm what they call a global impact entrepreneur. So what I did was I made disruptive change in the multifamily sector in the United States and Canada by inventing a systematic way to build very low, high efficiency, passive house multifamily buildings for equal to or less than standard construction. And that was a thing that was got me noticed internationally. So I'm here today, though, really to speak to you about what I've experienced. I've lived with you guys now. I've been staying in Nelson for the last 3 months. I've been living here, and we make our home in Toronto, but we will be heading back actually next Monday to Toronto, but we'll be back around Christmas time again for another 3, 4, 5 months. We're in the process of trying to find a home currently. So I wanted to, I saw Rachel at a couple of affordable housing summits that I went to and discussions, and then saw her again at a few other places, and she asked me if I'd come and speak to you guys. So I said, sure, I'd be happy to come and speak to you. And what happened to me what I've experienced in the last 3 months here in Nelson has been incredibly profound for me personally. And this is not the type of presentation I would typically give. Typically, I'm giving presentations to groups of stakeholders who are builders, developers, architects, engineers, those type of people. I rarely give talks to municipalities, and you'll probably see why when we're done. I'm usually just patted on the head and shuffled out the door and said, thank you very much. We'll never talk to you again. But I'm here because Rachel invited me. And I said to myself, why am I really here? Well, I'm here to be part of the Edmund Hillary Fellowship. And the Edmund Hillary Fellowship, the theory behind the fellowship was to bring thought leaders from around the world and from within New Zealand to New Zealand. And the theory was that New Zealand has the fertile soil to be a leader in the paradigm shift of the new economy that we think and we know must evolve. Because if it doesn't, we're all kind of going down a tube that's not real pretty. And so when I thought about what I was going to say to you guys, I really thought to myself, I'm just going to lay it all out. I'm just going to speak from my heart. And I'm just going to tell you what I've seen, what I found. At the end of the day, I want you to understand that I'm not trying to sell you anything. The fellowship is a self-funded, self-directed fellowship. So I can do anything I want. And I'm exploring the edge of regenerative thinking in New Zealand. That's what I'm doing personally and really enjoying it. But this presentation is just to give you some insight into what I have found in Nelson and what I think is probably really good news. So this little comic kind of pretty much sums up my entire life as a leader. I started in the early 80s building off-grid homes that I called healthy homes with no glue and no chemicals, and we had first-generation solar panels that came right after the Skylab in the 70s. Unfortunately, I just watched as we repeat mistakes. Well, when I came to Nelson, I didn't know what to expect. Right? I mean, I knew it was going to be beautiful. I knew it was going to be wonderful. I've got a cousin that lives here for over 10 years, and so I knew Nelson would be pretty wonderful. I visited plenty of times, but I really wasn't prepared for the depth of my connection with this community. And it was really through a series of incidents. My wife and I, this is Elizabeth over here, and my wife and I partake in a lot of activities here. We're part of the Quaker meeting when we're here, and we're singing with your choruses, and we're getting to know folks, and we're doing some demonstrations about things we believe in. But on March 15th, when students had their climate strike, it moved me to tears. I have 3 grown adult male children. And I felt like my 3-year-old son had fallen down and I wasn't comforting him, right? It felt that desperate to me that, here are our children reaching out to us and saying, help, save me. Why should it be my responsibility as an innocent child to do this? And I was losing, I was bawling. It was just so powerful for me. And then the other experience that happened to me, which was incredibly profound, was later that day when we had the shooting in Christchurch. And I cannot express to you my sorrow and my depth of feeling about it as an American. Because as an American, I know that our culture has directly contributed and given license to this type of hate around the world. And I felt ashamed and I felt just pain to my core. But it was really gratifying to me as I wept and worshiped with you through the process on those days afterwards, on that Sunday and that following Friday. And I felt like it really related to what these children are saying. It's not just climate. In the regenerative world, we don't think about one thing, we think about the whole, because it's all connected. And these children are not shielded from this evil that is coming and emanating all around the world. It's not just the United States. We see it in Brazil. We see it in the Philippines. We see it in Hungary. We see it over and over and over, repeated and repeated and repeated. And so, I looked at these children and I said to myself, oh my God, I'm responsible for this. I was a true believer in the 80s and 70s about my mission, and I sold my soul to have a 50-person design build firm. And I made plenty of money doing that and building really shitty buildings that are contributing to our grandchildren's carbon loading. And I have a lot to atone for. All right, this felt very personal to me. Now, as a regenerative explorer, which is really what I am, well, the thing you got to understand about the terms regenerative, it's a buzzword. We really don't know what it means yet. But I've done a lot of introspection to try to understand what does it mean to me, and I want to share that with you. To me, the key about regenerative thinking is healing. Healing of self, healing of place, healing of planet, healing of society. It's basic core healing. The other thing I understand really truly about regenerative thinking and doing is that it's additive. That I cannot enforce on you this type of thinking, feeling, or doing. That people have got to want to join. They've got to want to come along. Those are 2 realizations that I have no idea how to do it. That's honestly, I don't. But these are my 2 core takeaways thus far in my understanding what it means to be a regenerative explorer. The other thing that has happened is that when Rachel asked me to speak, I said, well, can I please meet with your staff? I'd like to see what are the issues, what's been going on, and I'd also like to understand what has been done in the past. And I found a very dedicated staff that had done amazing work, that you guys, as Nelson City, have produced some amazing documents and some amazing planning stuff. And it seems like what is going on, to me, is a bit of overwhelmedness at the prospect of what we're facing. I think that you as counselors, you as staff, take it very seriously that we have to shepherd this community and this country and this world through the next 20, 30, 50 years. And when we realize that responsibility on our shoulders and we realize the gravity of the problem and the size of the problem, it gets overwhelming. And so how do you make forward change, especially when you're in a cycle of election every few years? You have to elect and elect and elect. And anybody who wants to have your power, is going to try to oppose everything you do and say how horrible you are. So, and then if you get out, then you do the same thing. This is not a practical way for planning the kind of future that we need to plan and prepare for with the climate emergency that's facing all of us. I'm going to share this with you. I've only shared it with a few people, but I think it's an important thing.
Come on, people, been here before. We've spoken these words, we've fought these wars. How long will it be until you see yourself in me?
I share that with you. If it meant anything to you, good. It means a lot to me because I'm trying to I don't think in words. When I write, it's really difficult. I'm dyslexic and have hard times with it. I think in pictures. Maybe that's why I'm an architect builder. It's much easier. But that says so much about how it feels to me where we are right now. So what I want to do as I act as this mirror, I just want to go over a few basics here. So we see in many, many different indicators a similarity in a form of a graph, okay? And that form of a graph is known as exponential growth. Linear growth, I'll show you in a second. Linear growth is 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. That's the blue line or green line. Exponential growth is 1 plus 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8. And for those of you who have never heard the story about the person who played chess or Go with a Chinese ruler who said, just give me one grain of rice, and then on the next put 2 and the next put 4. And by the time it got to the end of the board, they had gotten all the rice in the kingdom. Exponential growth is unsustainable growth. Exponential growth is something that we see happening in every indicator, whether it's a good indicator like telecommunications or maybe a bad indicator as desertification. But this is something that we see. We are not fully aware of how it affects us as human beings. But this is, once again, something I want to unpack for you so that you guys can kind of follow me along where I'm going on this journey of words. So the question for me became too overwhelming. I could not understand what it was that I could do to make any change in this world because the powers that be, the force of inertia, everything in front of me seemed so large and so overwhelming and so hopeless. And what I realized was that exponential growth. So if I have 1 unit of time and 1 unit of quantity, there's undefined units. Exponential growth means that I get 2 times the quantity in half the time. Okay? That's one piece of rice plus 2 plus 4. And the thing about it is that, I've maintained for years that if you can start to see climate change within a human lifetime, you're probably already too late. Okay? And the thing to understand about exponential growth is I just picked any random date. 1850 happens to coincide with our Industrial Revolution and our use of fossil fuels. And if you say, take any number you want, 1850 to 1950, that 100 years of change. And then you compare the 50, 2000. then 25 to 2025. So how many people between 1950 and 2000 saw the climate change? I know in Virginia, where I lived for 35 years, I watched as crops that I could not grow when I moved there became easily grown. I knew a man when I moved there who was in his upper 80s who told me about how back in the 1920s, when he was a young man, they used to shoot their pigs at Thanksgiving and hang them outdoor all year until Easter because they'd stay frozen in the Blue Ridge Mountains. But he couldn't do that when I moved there in the early 80s. So, this kind of tangible climate change in our lifetimes, the thing to remember is, we're at 2020, right? Well, guess what? Whatever happened between 2020 and 2025, by 2037, that's going to happen again, right? And then by 2045, again. And by 2048, again. And by 2050, again, right? It's not something that we can't think about. It's something we have to prepare for. It's our choice whether or not we are going to be proactive or whether we're going to be reactive, right? We're choosing. By not choosing, you're choosing reactivity, because when a flood happens or when a drought happens or when a fire happens, you have to be reactive. It's like when an earthquake happens, right? I mean, you have to be reactive. But you can also choose to be proactive. But how do you do this? How do you be proactive when you have all these opposing forces? Well, this is where regenerative thinking comes in. Regenerative thinking says that, we can choose to kind of do systems as usual and fall off this cliff together. Or we can choose to re-evolve and regenerate our thinking. And see, the thing about regenerative thinking is it's not really about the doing. It's about the feeling. It's about the understanding, the connectedness of everything, of me to all you, of me to these deaths, of me to the earth. And in our current state, it is the same inherent characteristic of the human being that allows us to be, and I must say specifically of Western culture, although other cultures are the same in a lot of ways, but I'm looking mostly at Westerners here. But our thinking tends to be very exploitative. We don't see the climate as part of us. We don't see the planet as part of us. The planet is there to serve us, right? And we can separate ourselves from the planet. And we can separate ourselves from the pollution. And we can separate ourselves. And this same ability to separate I from we, or I from us, or I from planet, is the same thing that leads us to separate ourselves from refugees. And in my country, Muslims and blacks and Hispanics, seeing each as the other, the ability for them to take children and put them in cages and have literally children under overpasses in cages. The fact that 30 to 40% of Americans think that that's fine, it's that same thing. It's a self-limiting ability of human beings. In everything, we are in a dynamic system. And the system always will come to balance. And the balance within the human species is we self-limit ourselves. And we self-limit ourselves because we have these things that are freaking awesome. We have the best brains. We have great brains. We can do almost anything. But we have horrible hearts. And that's really where the choice comes down to. That's where regenerative thinking needs to begin. It's nothing to do with technology. It has 100% to do with hearts. We're on a road right now, and that road is running out, right? There's a train coming at us. I can't tell you exactly how far it is away, but I can see the light. I know that what we're doing is not working. So how do we deal with that? Well, in my specific world, right, I try to envision what the future state is. But my specific world is tiny, right? If you kind of look at all of human intelligence and all of human knowledge, I know a teeny, tiny, tiny, tiny little piece about a lot about a little tiny piece. I know a lot about carbon neutral building and economics and how to make those things work within our paradigm now, okay? And so what I've been doing to get over the hump and not deal with the exponential growth problem that I can't solve. I can't see my way out of it. I'm pretty negative about where we are as a species. But what I do is I try to look through at the future state, understand the boxes I'm living now, see what the future state, which will be a regenerative based building system, built environment, and trying to pull that future state as much as I can into this current state. That's what I'm doing in my tiny little world, right? My tiny little world. And my tiny little world represents one dot. But in a regenerative world, that one dot needs to be multiplied and multiplied and multiplied. And when we start thinking about multiplying our own expertise and our own dots, we end up starting to get to the core of how we can make a change. Now, Nelson has got, I've looked at the work you're doing. I've looked at your planning documents that you guys have spent so much time. This is where I'm being a mirror for you. You don't need outside people to come tell you what to do, right? You guys have done so much. You don't want to go spend more money studying a problem that is much bigger, and you know it's much bigger. You just can't get your brains around it. You need to understand, how do we make the change from this is where I am? We need to be somewhere over there. How do I get myself? How do I shepherd this community of people through all these unexpected things, right? Well, the question becomes to me, it's one of alignment, okay? We tend to solve problems very negatively. We tend to have, I have my position, and my position is here, and I have a position that's opposing, and we're gonna beat heads, and we're gonna try to compromise in the middle. But compromising in the middle is always not the best solution. So the question is, how do you focus on a problem that is 30, 50, 20, 10, next year out, that is so big that we all gotta pull in the same direction? Well, like I said, we've been singing with choirs. My wife's sung with choirs ever since I've known her. And the first thing we do when we sing is we all sing one note. And we just harmonize one note. And by harmonizing on whatever that note is, we can then raise the amplitude of the song and create amazing music. And the way that regenerative practice works is to get outside of your comfort zone, to understand that we don't know. You have to be uncomfortable with uncertainty. And part of it is you have to find that one note. What is the note that we can all harmonize around? Now, I think she's setting a hell of an example for the world. I really do. Gentle kindness. Talk about something that brought tears to my eyes. Listening to her address the United Nations was amazing. And maybe that's the note. I don't know. I honestly don't know what the note is. But I think she's trying to lead you guys in a direction that we all need to go. Now, when you're thinking about the future state, there are plenty of ways to get that thinking going. Understanding what's called transformative scenarios. There's plenty of practitioners that can help guide a community through a transformation, right? These kind of practices are used all the time to deconflict war zones. This is cutting edge thinking. And you guys are very capable of this. Now, I'm gonna throw out ideas to you right now because I don't wanna be negative, and I know I probably bummed everybody out, but I'm not intentionally doing it. I'm just trying to give you how grave the situation is and the opportunity that Nelson has. Joe said to me, you know, if we can't do it in Nelson, they're not gonna be able to do it anywhere. And I fully embrace that, right? It's a small community, closely knit. It's got a good heart. People know each other. It's fairly affluent compared to other communities. You guys are quite capable of doing it, but do you want to do it? So as I started thinking about this, I thought, well, let me just throw out a bunch of word vomit to you, right, about things that you can do. Well, let's say we aligned around kindness. Wow, how would that start? Well, just saying hello to people on the street is a pretty good way to start. How are you? What's your name? I haven't met you before. I have a practice of meditation where I close my eyes and play my guitar, and I find that that practice of meditation is enhanced when I'm sitting by a moving body of water, because when I'm closing my eyes, I can focus on the water and the guitar just happens. I have to record it to even know what I did. And it was really interesting because I've been playing under the Dammit and Niles where the brook comes into the Mai Tai, and it's wonderful because it's concrete and the brook's really vibrant there, and so it's electric in terms of getting. But I found out at meeting last week that there had been a vagrant playing music under the creek for the last 3 months. You know, what's the difference between vagrant and an EHF fellow? Nothing. Nothing. So, you know, so one of the things you can pick up litter when you see it, right? I mean, if I see a piece of litter in the street, I always try to pick it up. These are simple little things, right? Nothing's got to be hard. There's like an EHF fellow that's got something called Make Soil that encourages everybody anywhere to learn how to make soil. It's a very simple little website. You can knock together a composting bin out of pallets, which you guys have plenty of, and just start making soil, right? So these kind of things are really simple, but they start the people to maybe start thinking together in their hearts. I think the opportunity is much greater, though. You can start looking at densification, which I believe you are already. That's talking about that, right? Well, in talking to the staff, what are the crisis and opportunities? One of the problems here is that you've got a fairly decent water system, but your sewers are kind of old, right? Well, what if the densification came with composting toilets? And what if that composting toilet was a job creator that allowed people to then take that compost and put it into soil and start creating food security by using the black gold that you're right now flushing out? We all know where those 2 sewer plants are, right? We all know where they're sitting. We all know that's not a sustainable location, right? So maybe that's an idea. Another idea is, what about training at-risk folks to put up solar and underwriting that to help get some skills in the field? Or demountable, movable shelter. If you're going to densify, don't just densify, but densify in such a way that these shelters can be moved and moved easily, right? Because guess what? I've walked around Nelson plenty, and I've seen the 1840 shoreline. And if I scroll forward 180 years, we're well underwater, right? So all this really expensive real estate in Nelson is going to be worth nothing. So maybe there's a creative way that the society, the group, the people here could start to tackle this problem. I'm not saying do anything. I'm just throwing out crazy ideas. I'm not the one with the idea. You guys know this. I'm just a mirror. And so maybe if there's something happening, you can then move the town or move the parts of the town that have been designed to be moved easily, okay? Carbon accounting, that should be incorporated today. Brands is a leader in this in the world, in their carbon accounting. The city of Christchurch is already carbon accounting for all their buildings, right? Carbon accounting is something that's quite important, right? Because guess what, New Zealand? I hate to break it to you. The United States, China, Brazil, and India have not cut their CO2 emissions. They've all grown. And we need to lead the world to show them what a zero carbon economy can be. But guess what? We're still screwed. Because our tiny little piece of carbon in New Zealand still means we have to deal with everybody else's crap, right? Which means we need to be proactive about resiliency and understanding how to shepherd this community through the crises we know are coming. And the other accounting system that we need to think about is wellness accounting, right? We need to value things that are not traditionally valued, right? If I've got a child that is an autistic child and I have a parent staying home with that autistic child, that is the most valuable thing that person could be doing, and yet there's no value in it, right? We're talking about old paradigms that need to break, and they need to be broken somewhere. In fact, tomorrow we leave for 3 days to Gisborne, where we're going to be meeting with a group of iwi that are trying to do something like this and bring 70,000 from their diaspora back to their lands, right? And they're talking about all this stuff. I don't know where this all lies. I'm exploring. But you guys can do this stuff here. You don't have to do it all. Do a piece, do a part, do anything, right? Small-scale solar desalination. Guess what? We almost ran out of water. Well, we're only predicted to get worse and worse in droughts and worse in floods. So we know where we're going. This is not magic. So what about a small-scale, movable solar desalination plant that we can replicate and use as we need it, right? That could be very easily done. This is not high technology. You're basically boiling water with the sun. This is not hard. Waste to energy. One of the people in the EHF has got demonstration waste to energy plant going for the US Army right now that doesn't burn. It uses an oxidizing process that's completely clean, and a town like Nelson, the size of Nelson, is a perfect size for their small unit. Okay? Alternative economic nodes, places where you can start to create value out of non-traditional valued work. Now, how does that work? I don't know. That's one of the reasons I'm going to Gisborne, because there's a group of 5 people who are all about this stuff, and I don't know. I mean, I know a lot about building. I don't know anything about economics, right? Or how you do this kind of accounting. But maybe there's a way that these kind of things can be done. Here's one that cellulosic insulation. When I came here the first time to talk at the Passive House Conference 2.5 years ago in Christchurch, I ran through calculations. I said, well, I changed the industry in the US, or at least the multifamily low-rise, so let me run some quick calculations. And for me, I could always say, well, here I'm going to build a code, and I'm going to put some more carbon, embodied energy, in my buildings to make them higher performing and lose they use about 70% less energy than standard construction, cost the same or less. And I could make that equation, and I say, okay, because the grid that we had in Virginia was really dirty with coal, within a year to 18 months, that extra carbon that I've invested in my building is completely paid off by just the operational savings. When I did that same calculation for the South Island, I couldn't make any argument for putting 1 bit of carbon in any building, because your grid, except for a little bit of peak power in the wintertime, is all green. So the only savings over time is in maintenance. No real operational energy, no real operational carbon, and carbon equivalents are what we need to be thinking as a going towards zero carbon society. Now, when you start thinking about that, you guys don't even, I mean, here's an opportunity that just blows me away. In the US and in Europe and in Canada, they're using wood pulp for exterior insulative sheathing instead of EPS, right? Or XPS or polyiso, which are all fossil fuels. They're using wood fiber, a little glue and a little wax. And I look over here between, on the little part, I'm going, well, gosh, those logs sure are stacked high in that shipyard. Why the hell are the logs leaving? We could grind them up and make insulation out of them, and probably do it a lot cheaper than we're paying for insulation, right? So cellulosic materials. I'm in discussions now with a group here that's just bringing in their first crop of 5,000 hectares of hemp, and we're talking about what to do. They're only using the fiber. They've got a 1-to-7 ratio, 1 ton of fiber, 7 tons of waste, and that waste is perfect. So we're talking about right now putting that into building materials, into sheathing, into exterior insulations, into interior bat type insulations. But you know what? Nelson could become a hub of this kind of thinking if you wanted to, right? This is not pie in the sky BS. This is stuff like, I don't have to invent this. I can go to Europe and borrow it, right? You have an aging population here in Nelson. Crisis, no, opportunity. What does that mean? There's a lot of houses that are virtually empty, that are worth some kind of money, right? Well, I happen to believe that a lot of these houses ought to be lovingly deconstructed and all the materials reused to create a better, more healthy, and higher performing demountable architecture in this town. And I don't think that would do anything but draw in young people who are super excited about doing anything that has any hope whatsoever for the future. And if you're at least making those efforts to see a future that has got hope, you're going to have plenty of youngsters come in here and want to help. And they're going to need some place to live. Well, maybe we need to support more old people by having more workers, and maybe the old folks wouldn't mind sharing their land. I don't know. I don't know this. This is all way out there. This is why I never get asked back. Adaptation, crisis opportunity. I want to build a road around Nelson. Bam, 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 bam. You know what? Why not build a floating road that anticipates the climate change and sea level rise? There are already floating roads. These are not like, this one's in China. It's not like it's fake. It's not like I just made this up. They also have floating harbors. Maybe if your harbor and your roads begin to float, then you're adapting to climate change, and we know sea level rise is going to be much greater and much faster than any of the IPCC projections. This is important stuff for you guys to think about, because guess what? You're right in the maw, right? Every little coastal town that had ships going between them is going to get slammed. And lastly, why not make Nelson a hub of regenerative thinking and doing? I really believe that Kiwis are unique. And let me just finish up by giving you my observation, because I think this is key as an American to you guys. Now, I'm not just American. I've lived in Canada the last year and a half, right? We moved when Trump got in. And what I've realized is that what has come to me very clearly, in fact, a couple Sundays ago in meeting, was that the next 6 months, I'm going to be going to Canada. They have an election in October, and the conservatives in Canada are anti-climate and anti-refugee and anti-immigrant. This evil is the same. And I'm going to do everything I can to bear witness to my Canadian brothers and sisters about the contrast that I saw between New Zealand and the United States. And I want to speak to that for a second, because if you'll go back to my very first statement about regenerative thinking, it's about healing. And one of the greatest acts of healing that needs to happen in our society is the healing between indigenous and colonizer. And for good or bad, whatever you think about it, you Kiwis have been doing it for a generation and a half, longer than anybody else on Earth. And it has an effect, right? The fact that the national government said, we're going to give legal rights to a mountain and a river and a park. And we're doing it not because we know what we're doing it, that we know from what I've read, nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody is secure. They're like, we're doing this because our people, all of us, say, this is what we need to do, and we'll all figure it out together. So that, to me, was incredibly inspiring, that the government had enough respect after 40 years to make an uncertain move into a future that is inclusive. And I see Kiwis as get-it-done type of people. I see Kiwis as out at the edge of the world. I'm not saying disconnect from the world. Not at all. I'm saying embrace the world, but embrace it in the Kiwi way and lead through your actions and through your hearts. Thank you.